And it was just at this time when I began filming that my neighbour decided to do his lawns. Hey everyone, it's Alana and welcome to this week's video in which I will be doing the mid-year book freakout tag. Apologies also, as you just saw, that if you can hear like a buzzing or something in the background, that is my neighbour. He's just finished mowing his lawns. Now I'm pretty sure he's whippersnipping them. So anyway, on to the book tag. So this book tag gets done every year by like pretty much, from what I can gather, anyone on BookTube and also anyone who likes to blog or anything like that as well. So naturally, I decided I should do it. But in all seriousness, as a tool, I think this tag is really beneficial, mainly because it lets you track how you're going, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and all of that good stuff. As for who created this book tag, I think it was done a few years ago, and the name Chemi keeps on popping up. I'm really sorry, but I tried to look at the original video and I think it's been taken down. I think it's just become one of those tags that's so useful and just gets done every year that there's so many of these videos out there. Now, like I said, this video has been done a lot, but I personally love to keep on watching this video tag because I love seeing everyone's different answers and all the books they're loving, all the books they're not liking, everything that surprised them, and each video is going to be different because of what everyone's reading, and it's so interesting to see everyone's different answers for these questions. So before I get into the tag, I also just want to highlight the fact that I set a book reading goal this year of 50 books, and I am currently on my 52nd book of the year. If you follow me on my social media page on Instagram, you may have seen that last year my book goal was actually higher by 15 books. I had set a book goal of 65 books to read in the year of 2018. I managed that. I think I just managed to do that. So this year round, I thought I would put the limit to 50 books. Read 50 books in the year of 2019, mainly because I wanted an achievable goal. I didn't want to have to be rushing to read books just so I could say, oh, hey, I've read this many books this year. And I wanted to be able to, just enjoy what I'm reading a bit more, put the pressure off a little bit and see where I went from there. So I'm quite proud of myself because I haven't checked yet this year how many books I'm up to that I've read. And I feel like that takes a little bit of self-restraint, especially for someone like me who just needs to know everything now. So here is my list. 51 is Sea Witch Rising, which actually comes out next month. Comes out pretty soon, I believe. And I'm also currently reading a book at the moment which will make it onto this list, and I know that's probably a little bit of a breach of the tag, but I'm nearly done with it and it needs to be on the list for one of these questions. Another thing that I want to briefly mention before I get into this tag is that don't be surprised if there's more than one answer per question. It's hard to narrow some of these questions down, and I'm a big believer in sharing as much book love as possible, so more than one answer per question for probably most of the questions. But hey, if it helps recommend you a book, then I'm all for it. But yeah, that's all the housekeeping done for this video. Now we're going to jump right into the tag. I'm pretty excited to get to these questions and to share with you what I'm thinking of my reads thus far this year. So the first question right off the bat is a very powerful one, and it is, what is the best book you've read so far in 2019? Now remember what I said about multiple answers, because holy shit, how do you just narrow it down to one single book? Like, I've read 51 books this far this year and I cannot just single it down to one. So here are my picks. Emergency Contact by Mary H.K. Choi. This book, I love this. You all know by now that I don't read like a ton of contemporary anymore. That was more something that my teenage self really loved, but every now and again I like to pick one up, and I'm so glad I picked this one up. This definitely got 5 stars from me. It's basically about the lives of two people when their lives cross. One girl's in college, one guy is stuck in where he wants to go with his life, what he wants to do, his future, all that sort of thing, and I just love it. I also really loved the writing aspect in this book. Like, I love books that discuss writing craft in them, and this book did that and actually inspired me to write as well, so I love it for that. The next one is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I know a lot of people love this, and it's for good reason. I absolutely adored this one too. It follows the life of Evelyn Hugo as she recounts everything that happened in her career as a Hollywood actress and her greatest achievements, her greatest regrets, to a young journalist called Monique. This book was heartwarming, it was honest, it was raw, it was pure, and I'm so glad I picked it up. This one also got 5 stars. It's also a bit of change from what I usually read because it's not fantasy, and I'm glad that I've been expanding a little bit with my reading taste this year. Not a whole lot, so it's fine, but a little bit, so that's good. And the third one that I thoroughly enjoyed this year so far was Vicious by V.E. Schwab. There's a reason this is so popular, and there's a reason you should read it, and that is morally grey characters, superheroes, but actually supervillains, and just the spaces in between good and bad. I loved it. I loved it so much. In this one, we follow the story of Victor and Eli, who used to be college roommates and best mates, but have within 10 years that have passed become mortal enemies, and it follows their ideals and how they got to where they are. Victor's just broken out of jail. Eli is off doing his thing, and it's everything you need to read in a superhero type novel, but I don't want to use the term superhero because there's no real heroes. It's morally grey. I think that's the best way to describe this. It's cutthroat and morally grey, and you need to read it. It's also told in an interesting format. It's not told in chronological order. It jumps all around the place, and I love it for that. It adds to the story so much more, and the pace of this is just, you get on a train and there are no stops. You are on it. You are smash reading this. It's amazing. The next question is the best sequel you've read so far in 2019. And for me, that comes down to 2 books and an honorable mention. The first one is Arch Enemies by Marissa Meyer. This book follows Renegades, and then there's going to be a 3rd book, which I'm so excited to get to. This sequel did everything I wanted it to do to the first one. Like the first book, I was like, oh yeah, it's good, and I'm glad I've read it, but I'm not like completely blown away. This one I was. It was everything. It had more character arcs. It had just more of everything. More of the world, more powers, more politics, more dynamic. I loved it so much. The next one is Sea Witch Rising by Sarah Henning, which follows Sea Witch. The first book was a reimagining of Ursula's origin story, and same sort of thing. I enjoyed it. I wasn't blown away with it. I found some problems with it, but Sea Witch Rising, which was more the reimagining of The Little Mermaid, just blew it out of the water for me. No pun intended. It was amazing. I loved it. I really loved the addition of Runa. She is everything you want in a protagonist, and her character arc was amazing, and I loved her. I loved her so much. And that honorable mention I was talking about was The Mad Ship by Robin Hobb. This is the 2nd book in a 2nd duology set within her Hobb multiverse thing that she's got going on. This whole 2nd trilogy was amazing. I did read these books back to back to back, so they all sort of blur into one now, but they are just amazing. Amazing, amazing, amazing. The first book in this 2nd trilogy is Ship of Magic, but I did read that one last year in December, I think. So this sort of more counts for the tab. Question 3 is a new release you haven't read yet but want to. This one is a bit more of a tricky one because there's nothing that's really like hitting me in the face with I want to read it that's been released in the first half of the year, because if I've wanted to read it, I've probably already have read it, or I've forgotten about it and it's lost on my shelf somewhere, or I'm also going to get the release date wrong because I think it's still a new release, but it's probably just been sitting on my shelves for like that 5 months too long. But I'm gonna say The Boneless Mercies by April Genevieve Tukolk. Really sorry, I'm terrible at pronouncing names. This would be my pick for this question, I think. Let's just check when it was actually released. 2018. So yeah, I botched that a little bit, but so far this one on my shelves, just because it sounds like something that I would love, but I just haven't gotten around to reading yet. The hook on the back of the blurb says, "This is a story of mercies and witches, of reeds and thorns, of women and giants." So that sounds amazing. The main character is a death trader, which sounds intriguing and terrifying. There's also a rumor of a monster that's slaughtering women and children, so it sounds dark and twisted and exactly what I'd like. Wasn't released this year though, but you know, we'll count this. Question number 4 is most anticipated release for the second half of the year, and if you've watched any of my videos so far, you know what I'm gonna swing it to. My pick for this will of course be Dark Dawn by Jay Kristoff, because I need that book in my life. But I know there's not that much more of a wait left for it to come out. I love Nevernight. It did take me that initial like 100 pages to get into it, but then I was just hooked and I needed it. I needed all the stab, like I needed the cutthroatness. And then I really loved where Godsgrave went with the different setting, and I need to know what happens in Dark Dawn. And then I need to cry because that's the last book in the trilogy. Question number 5 is a bit of a spicy one. It is the biggest disappointment of 2019 for you. I should also quickly mention that the books that I'm including on this list are not all ones that have been released in 2019. I'm just going off ones that I've read in 2019. So if that wasn't clear before, hopefully that's clear now. But anyway, on to question number 5. Biggest disappointment. For this question, immediately The Empress of All Seasons by Miko Jean came to mind. This book just wasn't everything that I'd hoped it to be. I felt let down. Like, I loved the world building in it. I've talked about this before in my previous month's wrap up, so go check out my June wrap up if you want to hear further thoughts on it. But basically it wasn't what I had hoped it would be. I was hoping for more of like a Hunger Games sort of type plot, and it didn't really happen. And I also sort of went off the recommendations of one of my favorite authors. They shared it in their Instagram stories, and I was like, yep, I want to read that because I love your work, so I'm gonna absolutely love this. Basically, I went in with my expectations way too high, and it just wasn't really for me. The second book that comes to mind is one that wasn't necessarily a disappointment in terms of writing, but more in terms of just felt like a big old tease, and that is The Fork, the Witch and the Worm by Christopher Paolini. When I found out that this book would be coming out, I was over the moon because I absolutely love the inheritance cycle. You may also know it as like the Eragon books. I love that series. It's one of my all-time favorite and always will be. But when I found out that this one came out, again, sort of same thing. My expectations were super high, and I'm like, yes, we'll get to return to the world, to the life of Eragon and Saphira, and catch up with all our favorite characters. And instead, it was sort of just 3 short stories, hence the title of the book, and it wasn't enough. Basically, I'm really glad we got more in the world, but this was short, and this is the hardback of this, and even like the style and manufacturing of the book, like the margins here are huge. The margins here are huge, and there's not that much text on the page. So I felt like it was a book that was purposely stretched out, and there just wasn't enough to it. Just to show you the comparison of what I mean by a small hardback, I count this as like a regular size hardback. This is The Fork, the Witch and the Worm. I don't know if you can tell, it's so small, and basically if we were returning to the world of Eragon, I wanted a little bit more. I don't know what the future of this series is, if we're going to be getting more books or what. I have seen on Christopher Paolini's Instagram page that he's writing something completely new, which I'm also very excited about. I love this author. He's one of my favorites, and I just want him to be writing more and to read all his books, please. But yeah, I wanted more from the world, and I didn't really get it. Number 6 is the biggest surprise of 2019 so far, and I'm going to kick it to Sadie by Courtney Summers. I picked up this book a little bit apprehensive just because I've been seeing mixed reviews. Like, some people loved it, some people were like meh. I also heard that it was mixed format, which it is. So one part of it is told through Sadie's point of view and the other half is told through podcast format. But holy shit, I'm really glad I picked this up. I also don't usually pick up thrillers like this, but this was amazing, and just that ending is probably what made it the biggest surprise of the year for me. I'm still a little bit shaken up about it. So, amazing, biggest surprise of 2019. Question number 7 is your new favorite author, and this could be a new debut author or could be new to you. And for this one, I am going to go with Charlaine Harris, who is the author of the True Blood series. These books are definitely a guilty pleasure read, but they are so easy to read. There's so many books in the series, and they're all around like the 300-ish page mark. So they're really easy to smash through, but basically I'd class this as like supernatural, paranormal, romance sort of thing, and it's just so easy to consume. Her writing style is so good, but also there are some really warm moments in these books too for what they are. So I'm really enjoying her writing. Question number 8 is your newest fictional crush. I don't really fangirl over fictional characters heaps. Like, I admire them, I love their journeys, and there are some that just melt my bloody heart. But I'm not on any huge bandwagons or anything like that for characters. But I will say that for this one, my answer will have to go to Sam from Emergency Contact. This boy is just all sorts of hurt. Like, he's stuck, he needs help, but he doesn't know that he needs it. He also tries to do the right thing by someone in this book in a situation that he's put in, and he bakes when he is feeling blue. I just love it. He is everything. If I had to have a fictional crush, it'd be Sam. Question number 9 is your newest favorite character, and I could swing this and say another book that I've already mentioned and say Runa from Sea Witch Rising, just because she is powerful and amazing and realizes her potential, but I want to include more books on this list, so I'm going to swing it to Dita from The Librarian of Ipswich by Antonio Iturbe. First of all, I want to say that this character is actually based off a real person, and that alone is enough to blow your mind, but basically basically in this one, she's a 14-year-old girl who is surviving in the family camp, and she is entrusted with the remaining like 9 books or something that people have actually been able to smuggle in and keep in the camp, which is a deadly thing to do. And I loved her heart and I love her hope. She's amazing. Read this book if you haven't read it. Now we're on to the question, which is all about the feels, and that is question number 10, a book that made you cry. Oh boy. This is the one that I mentioned that my current read is gonna make an appearance on, because that book has just had me sobbing the last like 3 days straight, and I can't control it, and it's just, my heart hurts. But before we get to that one, there are 2 other books that also had me crying. The first one is Fool's Errand by Robin Hobb. Something happens in this book, and I'm still not recovered from it. I don't want to say anything more because I don't want to spoil anything. This is the first book in the 3rd trilogy in Robin Hobb's multiverse, and the thing that happens, it happens sort of towards the end of this book, and you sort of feel it through this book that it might be a possibility, but you're like, no, that won't happen. It happens, and I was crying, the pages got wet, holy fuck, that's all there is to say. The second one that had me absolutely ugly crying was The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I know I've already mentioned this book on this list so far, and that is because it's amazing, but also there were multiple moments that had me crying. If you've read it, how do I hint at this without spoiling it? The moment sort of about 3/4 / towards the end with the 2 women in, where do they go? I want to say Spain, but I could be wrong. But anyway, the 2 women in that moment overseas when something happens. Ugly crying. And the last book I really want to mention for this question is A Bridge of Clay by Markus Zusak. This book is heartbreaking. It's also the one that I'm currently reading. I'm up to page 524, and I think I've got like 50-ish pages to go. And this thing has had me crying since, I think you can sort of see my makeup stain. Yeah. Since about halfway. It's just, it is tough on the heart. So when I first started this one, I wasn't really into it. It's jumbly. It's very all over the place. You don't feel like you're getting the whole story, but stick with it because it is amazing. It's also very lyrical. Like, I know Markus Zusak loves to play around with words and stuff anyway, and I love him for that, but this one is one of his books where he does that like the most, I feel, and it will take you a little bit to get into, but then it's just gonna keep on like punching you in the heart. I have not cried so much in a book this year until I picked up this one. Question number 11 is one that I feel is probably like one of the hardest questions on this list. There wasn't a book that really sprung to mind when I first saw this question, and I think that's saying something about myself as a reader. The question is a book that made you happy. For me, I love bittersweet moments, and I love a book to wreck me, which means there will be happiness in the book somewhere, because then it's gonna have to like pull that happiness down. But I never just read a book and go, oh, that was nice, and love it. Like, there's gotta be another element to it. So for this one, it was hard for me to pick a book, but I have come up with 2 because, like I said, multiple answers to one question. The first one is Warcross by Marie Lu. I really love this book. The reason why I'm including it for this question is because the virtual reality aspect made me happy. I thoroughly enjoyed reading the world building and everything in this book. I think it was done so well. I could visualize walking down the streets of Tokyo with overlaying virtual images and things over the top of buildings, and I loved that. The second one I'm going to mention is Warrior of the Wild by Tricia Levenseller. This book wasn't as hard-hitting as I thought it would be. It also read more middle grade-y, which I'm not really into, but I still really enjoyed this book. And I think this book is most suited for this question because I came away from this book going, that was nice, that was good, because everything, you know, is resolved and wrapped up and people triumph that you want to triumph and all that sort of thing. But there wasn't as much depth to it as I was hoping, but it was still a really good book. So I'm gonna go with this one. Question number 11 is the most beautiful book that you've bought this year. For this one, I'm probably gonna go with King of Scars by Leigh Bardugo, even though it wasn't my favorite ending / book. When I first read this, I gave it 5 stars because I was still blown away and like, what the fuck just happened? But on reflection, there were problems. If you've read it, maybe you'll know, maybe you'll agree. You don't have to agree, but there were problems. But in terms of shallowness, this book is beautiful. Look at the cover. It's like gold and shiny. And then we go under the dust jacket and we have this. How beautiful is that? And then there's a third and then. We go inside and we thank Booktopia for offering signed books because it's also signed. Beautiful. And the 13th and final question is, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? I could just say all the ones on my TBR, but that's not going to happen. There are nearly 30 of them. And yes, I know I've said I've been really good lately, but I just placed a book order yesterday, so that's not going to happen. I will narrow it down for you. In terms of within the next month, I really want to get to as many Jay Kristoff books that I haven't read yet, because I will be attending his author event in August. And along the same vein, any books of Becky Abbatali's that I haven't read yet. These are the books that I went out and bought and placed the orders for, because I love going to an author event and having read like the majority of their works and knowing all the inside jokes and knowing that I'm not going to be spoiled for things because I have actually read the books. For both these authors, I've read about half of their works, which is pretty good considering Jay Kristoff is a writing machine and just seems to be turning out books left, right and center. And also because Becky Abbatali writes contemporary, which I don't read a whole heap of, but I enjoy her books. So I'm about halfway through both authors, but I also placed a 5-book order. So that's going to be hard within the next month, but I'm going to attempt that. In terms of a longer sort of timeline, I really need to read The Crow Girl by Eric Sund by the end of the year. This book looks terrifying, and that's what's stopping me from picking it up. I also know that it is terrifying because one of my friends has given/loaned me this book. So for my birthday, she wrapped this up and she said, read this and then return it to me. You can take as long as you want. And that was at least 3 months ago now. So I really need to read this. She's also told me a bit about it though, and it's a psychological thriller. Like, it sounds really messed up, and it's really good too. It's also really thick though. So I'm terrified. I've just looked at the back cover and it says, goodbye Hannibal Lecter. Oh shit. So yeah, I need to grow some balls and try and read this. So that's it. That's all the questions answered. Thank you so much for watching and stopping by. I hope some of my answers have encouraged you to pick up some books, and if you want to do this tag, feel free to do it, because I didn't get tagged to do this. I just did it because I really wanted to, and also, like I said in my intro, it's going to be a good tool to see what I thought of the books that I read in the first half of this year. So that's going to be it for me today. Once again, thank you for watching. It means the absolute world to me. I am just doing this for the love of books, so when people actually watch my videos, I squeal inside. It's amazing. But yeah, have a great day. I will see you in my next video. Bye!